Babylon's most famous monument may never have existed, and the people who lived there knew. Around 600 BCE, King Nebuchadnezzar II ruled Babylon. The city sat on the Euphrates River in what is now Iraq. It was the largest city in the world at that time. 50,000 people lived within its walls, mud brick, narrow streets, the smell of date palms and donkey urine, not poetry, the reality. Greek writers, 3 centuries later, wrote about a garden, terraced, watered by mechanical pumps, filled with trees and flowers. It belonged to Nebuchadnezzar's wife, they said. She was homesick for her green homeland, so the king built her paradise in the desert. It became known as the Hanging Gardens, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. There's a problem, a big one. No one living in Babylon ever wrote about it, not once. The Babylonians kept records. They carved them into clay. Kings bragged about their buildings. Priests documented temples. Merchants listed goods. Tax collectors wrote everything down. Thousands of these tablets survive today. Archaeologists have translated them. The Hanging Gardens don't appear, not in any of them. A baker in Babylon around 580 BCE didn't know yet what history would say about his city. He woke before dawn, mixed barley flour with water, shaped loaves for the communal oven. He would have passed through the city streets dozens of times. He saw the great walls, the temples, the marketplace, the canals that actually brought water into the city. What he did not see was a hanging garden. Neither did the potters, the weavers, the soldiers standing guard at the gates, the slaves who hauled water for drinking and cleaning. They lived in the world as it was, not as Greek storytellers would later describe it. The Greek writers who invented this story never visited Babylon. Strabo wrote about it around 20 BCE, 300 years after Nebuchadnezzar. Diodorus Siculus wrote about it. Josephus mentioned it. None of them were eyewitnesses. They were copying older accounts that may have been copied from accounts that were invented. There's another theory, a more complicated one. The gardens may have existed, but not in Babylon. Archaeology suggests they might have been in Nineveh, the Assyrian capital, built by a different king, Sennacherib, a century earlier. But the story got mixed up, moved, renamed, lost in translation across centuries. What matters for our purposes is this: the ordinary people of Babylon lived their lives without these gardens. They never saw them, never mentioned them, never knew they'd become famous. They knew their own city, the dust, the heat, the rhythm of work and trade and family. A merchant's wife in Babylon around 590 BCE wanted cool places in summer. She had access to courtyards, fountains, pools in wealthy homes. The wealthy used water to create comfort, but these were practical, modest by the standards of later fantasy. A rooftop garden perhaps, vegetables, herbs, not a terraced paradise that required impossible engineering. The king did build things. Nebuchadnezzar was a real builder. The Ishtar Gate still stands in museums today, the processional way, the walls, but his own inscriptions, carved in stone, don't mention a hanging garden. He talks about what he actually built, what he actually did, not what later storytellers wished he'd done. Here's what we know for certain. The ancient writers who described the Hanging Gardens were good storytellers. They understood what made a story memorable: a king, a homesick queen, a monument so grand it seemed impossible. It's the kind of tale that spreads, that gets repeated, that becomes true through repetition, even when no one actually saw it. The people of Babylon couldn't have known this would happen. They lived in their city. They knew what was real. The gardens weren't there, so they didn't mention them. They mentioned what mattered to them: the price of grain, the flooding season, the tax collector's visit, the birth of a child, the death of someone loved. By the time the Greeks were writing about the gardens, Babylon was already declining. The city would fall to Alexander the Great in 331 BCE. By then, no one who'd actually lived there in Nebuchadnezzar's time was alive to contradict the story. The witnesses were gone. Only the tale remained. Archaeologists have dug in Babylon for over a century. They found evidence of everything else the ancient writers claimed: the temples, the palaces, the walls, but no hanging garden, no remains of the mechanical system, no evidence of the exotic plants. The story doesn't match the ground. This matters, not because we love debunking myths, but because it shows us something true about how history works. What gets remembered isn't always what happened. What gets famous isn't always what existed. The ordinary people who lived through it knew the difference. They lived in reality. We inherit the stories. We often mistake stories for reality. The baker in Babylon, the merchant's wife, the water carrier, the weaver, they lived full lives. They saw real things. They built a real city that lasted centuries, but they never saw the hanging gardens. And we shouldn't pretend they did. Not to them, not to us. Subscribe to uncover what ordinary people actually lived through, the stories history forgot to tell.